How to recognize an awakened man or woman. This episode is for both men and women. How can you truly recognize whether a man is awakened or at a certain level of consciousness, or a woman is awakened at a certain level of consciousness where they are mature enough, conscious enough to actually be in a deep relationship, in a committed, devoted relationship? There are many similarities between them. The essence is shared, but there are also key nuances, subtle differences. And I will go into those in a very practical way today. Because it's not a checklist. It's not, oh, he or she understands this and has read this book, or that might be great. And there is nothing wrong with that, but it's much deeper. It's about embodiment. So ultimately the question becomes, how can we truly see whether one is embodied, are actually living the spiritual journey, rather than talking or projecting an image of it? That is what today's episode is about. And an important disclaimer, when I use the word awakened woman, awakened man, awakened being, it's important to bring awareness. Awakening is also a good way to put it. I'm not saying awakened, you reach a certain stage and then you're above others. There will be an ego game. There's no hierarchy. And this is not about now I'm awakened, so I don't do anything. We're always in evolution. We're always awakening and expanding. I'm referring to reaching a certain level of consciousness and healing in our awakening journey, where we are truly led by something deeper within us, where we are ready for a deeper level of intimacy, depth, meaning, service, and even abundance in this life. My name is Lorin. I'm an author, coach, and hypnotherapist. I help you to understand masculine and feminine dynamics at the deepest level. It all begins with integrity. An awakened man or woman lives with total integrity, radical honesty toward others and themselves, does not engage in lying to themselves or others, does not engage in manipulation. Integrity is the embodiment and the true foundation of spirituality, of being an awakened being. Awakening and spiritual depth without integrity is ultimately a form of bypassing, a form of intellectual avoidance and ego spirituality. An awakened man or woman both would rather speak their truth, even when it costs them something. Because living in truth and integrity, which is also living in love, the highest love, is the biggest and highest virtue of all. So this kind of saying of selling your soul, and I'm not necessarily referring to it as other people might refer to it, but I'm giving you an example of changing who you are, kind of not honoring your true virtues and values and not building your life around that, around truth, around integrity, around love and a higher consciousness, then really what's happening is that we are abandoning our soul. We're abandoning our truth. And an awakened being, by definition, is just not going to do that. There is a true wholehearted devotion to that. That is almost an unwavering element in their life. No matter what happens, I'm not going to suddenly be out of integrity, manipulate, lie to myself or others. This is just not part of this life. This is not part of the way I choose to live my life. Because I know the pain of not being honest with oneself. I know the pain of projecting a persona or an image based on how others are going to perceive you, so that they validate you, so they approve of you. And that's just something that's not going to happen with an awakened soul. They're not going to compromise, never, on the virtue of truth, integrity, and love, and total honesty. That is set in stone. If that is not something a person embodies, then it doesn't mean they're bad necessarily, because yes, some people deliberately manipulate others, but I'm not talking about this today. Other people, they lie to themselves, and when you lie to yourself, you will naturally lie to others, and you won't even think, oh, I'm not being honest with myself, I'm living out of integrity. It's not like you're thinking that and then doing it. It's unconscious. Not an excuse, yes, but also not every person who engages in unconscious behavior is doing this out of malicious intent. They're simply still on the journey. But if a person is still not entirely honest, secretive, doesn't treat others in life with full integrity, that reveals an ultimate mirror of their embodiment. Not to judge them, but a clear mirror of where they might be in their journey. Which leads us into the topic of spirituality. For both the awakened man, woman, or awakened soul, spirituality is lived. It is not performed. It is not an ego projection. Look at me, how spiritual I am. I'm awakened. I'm this or that. It's not stacking up more labels or more identities. There is no hierarchy. There is no conceptualizing. There is no using kind of spiritual depth against the other and seen as more evolved than the other. That is always an ego dynamic. It has nothing to do with true embodiment. The hallmark of true embodiment is actually not that you don't speak about spirituality, because it can be beautiful to speak about it, but the emphasis is on actually living and embodying spirituality rather than projecting an image of spirituality. The emphasis is on actually being present, actually opening your heart, actually practicing devotion, surrender, whatever it is, rather than talking about it or projecting an image about it or being seen as more than. Their spirituality, in other words, is grounded in a way, embodied, it's humble. It's both deeply human and relatable, and yet so practical. It's really more in the moment, in conflict, in challenging situations, when life or the universe or the creator is testing us. It's repair after an argument. It's mature ways of seeing the imperfect nature of relationships and not expecting a fantasy. And there's so much more to this, but their spirituality is truly grounded and humble and very, very practical. And that's important. If someone's spirituality is not practical, but it's extremely abstract and it's all up in the clouds, but their life is total chaos, unorganized, and a total disaster and chaotic mess, then no judgment, but it usually means it's not embodied. It's not part of who they are yet. Maybe they've accessed peak experiences, but those peak experiences haven't been integrated yet. The embodied being doesn't care about a peak experience anymore. They care about how can I actually expand all of this in the day-to-day, in the most mundane moments of all. Emotional maturity. And that is very important. An awakened woman or man does not engage in some drama. An awakened man or woman or being ultimately hardly engages in any emotional drama anymore. Drama, big fights, big projecting of emotions. All these are usually still signs that there is something inside that wants to be seen, that wants to be validated, that wants to be held. But it's expressed in an unconscious way. It's expressed in a wounded way that causes more pain. And paradoxically, these cycles of pain and drama and everything is a disaster and all is falling apart and then everything is fine again. These cycles, we can get almost addicted to them because they're a form of avoiding our own addiction to drama, to emotional drama, because many of us are addicted to some kind of emotional drama in our life. Because remove all of that and suddenly you're really faced in the stillness with your own being. Many people don't realize this, but when life is going amazing, then many people feel bored. They need the drama. And it's not that an amazing life or an abundant life full of love, full of abundance in every possible dimension is boring. It's just that the nervous system from the past is still equating richness or fullness of life with some chaotic intensity and emotionally charged pain and cycles of suffering. And really the path of awakening is to realize I don't want this anymore. I really don't want to engage in that anymore. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to own my responsibility, because almost every dynamic in a relationship is co-created in some shape or form, except abuse. Yes, the person who is being abused is unconscious of what is happening, but to say they're co-creating it and enabling the other person is a very gray area and something I don't agree with. Of course, we all have every dynamic is co-created in some shape or form, but where there is gaslighting or narcissistic dynamics, the conversation changes, right? So that's not what I'm talking about. But apart from those dynamics where it's deliberate, everything is co-created. Even if it comes primarily from the other person is still engaging with it in some capacity. Their own wounding is partaking in it. So the awakened man or woman or being really comes to this place of, I no longer want this. And you might even have said that in a relationship. You might even say that to yourself. I'm done with this. I'm not going to go back to that same place of suffering and repeat this cycle again and again and again. It's just not going to happen. And when you truly make that choice, not, oh, I don't want it, but really from the depths of your being, then something happens. Because in that moment, the deepest part of your being starts to look for an answer. And trust me, you can always find an answer to these things. But the devotion has to be equally intense as the pain that you experienced, I like to say. When the devotion to work through it and find not an intellectual but spiritual and deeper embodied answer to move and transcend this, it has to be equally intense. Otherwise, it stands no chance against that pain and repeated suffering. This doesn't mean that an awakened man or woman is perfectly healed, but it does mean that one of the key areas of focus and priorities in their life is to ensure to actually work through these bigger dramas that keep resurfacing in their life. To ask the deeper question, what is my responsibility here? What is the lesson I need to learn? To have an open mind and heart to expanding with humbleness, also realizing that we all have our flaws and our lessons to learn as a soul in this life. Another hallmark sign is devotion and service. Every awakened being has a service and devotion in some way to something greater than themselves, a deeper meaning in life. That there's something that almost one part of them is in this world and the other part is rooted in a higher vision of love and of evolution, of consciousness. And it doesn't matter what label you give that, it doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you can truly feel it, that you can truly bring this into everyday life. And through it, not only transform yourself, but transform the lives of all those who you touch. My work and everything I do is informed by something greater than myself. Me as a person, okay, maybe I know a few things, but there is something deeper inside that I feel connected to, that is guiding me on this path. A deeper knowing, so to speak, a surrender to the higher calling within as a soul. And that is deeply, deeply humbling. And you can see that flicker in the eyes of the one who is perhaps imperfectly, as we all are, but connected and accessing this deeper calling. And that doesn't mean it's something grand or special. Everything is special. But what I mean by that is it's not measured by numbers or people or metrics or doing something big. It's something you feel. And you see it in someone's eyes. There is just a a flicker, there's a love, there's a light, there's a radiance, there's something that really touches you very, very deeply. It's something that moves you. Now, these are the shared ones, and of course there are many, many more. But from here, as the final piece here, let's actually go into the difference of embodiment as the feminine and as the masculine. And I use heterosexual language here for simplicity and also poetic reasons. But just know, we all carry these energies within us, and they're not gender specific. The awakened feminine and the awakened masculine express very differently. The awakened woman is very different in communication than the awakened man. And if we put a blank label and say the awakened woman is always grounded and calm and steady in conversation, and so is the man, then we're doing a huge disservice of truly understanding the difference between these energetics, the masculine and the feminine. The feminine is all about embodiment. It's not about how composed she is and how much she controls her speech and how steady she is. It's more about how alive she is. Her body is deeply expressive, connected to the full range of life. She is alive. She is embodied. She feels everything: grief, joy, pleasure, fear. And she doesn't suppress any of this to appear spiritual. And for a long time, as part of the suppression of the feminine, we've actually put this kind of blank label, or when a woman embodies that, it means she's still not awakened. But that is not true. Feminine embodiment is very different than masculine embodiment, where the masculine at a very awakened or conscious state of being is very grounded, steady, and has a more linear kind of unwavering grounded presence. The feminine fluctuates much more, not because of a loss of control, but she embodies the full spectrum and the full range of life. And this is so powerful because both actually have their weaknesses here. The masculine can get stuck in the mind and become too rigid, and there's no room for life. There's no room for the full experience to really feel and to be nourished and to receive fully, to let go. Everything needs to be controlled and tight and rigid. And the feminine can also, in her full expression of life, notice maybe that there is a lack of grounding, and her voice can become perhaps, I don't want to say too sharp, but it's no longer the sharpness of her intuition. It's almost like there is no grounding of the storm inside her. And I always have to be mindful of how I speak about this, because unfortunately, because we've heard so much nonsense about women are unpredictable, women have mood issues and all these things, all this nonsense, I believe truly is born out of a total lack of understanding of the difference between feminine embodiment and masculine embodiment. An awakened woman or an awakened man have a very different state of embodiment. They have very similar ideals and virtues, but their expression and how they communicate differs very often. And that is the beauty. Being different creates an incredible charge and magnetism, and it's also how we evolve and learn. Because the feminine teaches the masculine to get out of rigidity, stuck in the mind. Everything needs to be controlled. And the masculine helps the feminine to create a container, to create a sense of safety and perhaps even structure around the sheer force of her full range of expression, her capacity to feel so deeply, but without losing herself in feeling and experiencing life at such a deep and intense level. So this interdependence between the two is really, this difference is the charge that connects them, and it's also the invitation for both to learn from each other and to evolve together. It doesn't mean one is better, one is more advanced, one is more awakened. It means both have strengths where the other usually has a weakness, and vice versa. Leading into the masculine, the awakened masculine, on the other hand, I talked about this already, but is defined by a depth of presence. There's a sense of grounded clarity. He's more steady. He's also a human being with emotions, but there is more a sense of unwavering steadiness. He doesn't chase. He doesn't collapse. He doesn't perform to prove himself. He's here. He's steady. He knows who he is. He knows what he wants. He knows where he's going. He's rooted in something more powerful than himself. He's able to listen deeply, to hold space deeply, and to protect fiercely if necessary. The feminine feels safe around him, not because he is agreeable or talks about safety and divinity or holding space, but because he lives and embodies his highest truth. And that truth is deeply magnetic. That grounded clarity is deeply safe. She knows exactly where she is at with him, so to speak. So we can say in essence, the awakened feminine moves life. The awakened masculine anchors life. That's why in ancient traditions, the feminine is the river, the current. The masculine is the riverbed. The feminine is the wave. The masculine is the shore, is the rock that receives the wave. The feminine is the weather and its many expressions. The masculine is the mountain. These are just metaphors from nature. Don't take them too literally. You could change them up completely. You could even say the feminine is the mountain and find a different metaphor for that and why that is. It doesn't matter. It's just about speaking and giving words to a deeper state of embodiment that is viscerally and somatically felt ultimately. And when those two meet, the awakened masculine and the awakened feminine, there is recognition. It's not about words or appearances. There's something deeply energetic, something undeniable. Not one is better than the other. Both are sacred and both are needed. And the more a woman awakens, the more she's deeply at home in that feminine embodiment that I've described, experiencing life fully, no longer explaining or justifying her experience or trying to be or changing or second guessing herself. And it's the same for the masculine. None of them are perfect, but they're humble enough to always have their mind, heart open to learning, to expansion, and especially in union, in relationship, to learn from each other, and therefore to evolve individually and inevitably together as one. The awakened man and woman or being all share the same virtues and a very similar depth, but feminine expression differs from masculine expression. And it's here because in that dance, in that meeting of each other, there is truly, from the depths of my own experience, the most profound transformation and liberation of our own soul. And when we understand that we are so similar, but at the same time so different, there is just an incredible mystical beauty in that. There is an endless novelty, but not a novelty that is shiny or pleasurable, something much, much deeper. You recognize an awakened woman, all those things that I mentioned, and her being at home in that expression. And the same with a man. Their presence, their energy, their level of consciousness becomes undeniable. There isn't even a question. And they all have things to learn, I, you, everyone, but there's no avoidance or hiding of any of that, but rather a full embrace and a courageous facing all that needs to be faced in the name of love and awakening. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode or watching this episode. It's a true honor to have you here and to be of service in your powerful journey. Thank you for your trust in me. If you want to benefit from more free offerings, if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe to my exclusive email list, which is entirely for free. Every Friday I send out a very meaningful email directly into your inbox with deep immersive teachings and practical insights. You can find it under lorincren.com/newsletter. Or by simply clicking on the show notes or episode description. And if you feel called to go deeper into my offerings, I invite you to go to lorinkren.com/trainings, and you will see all our upcoming trainings and deep immersive offerings. And if you haven't yet subscribed, wherever you are listening or watching this, I highly invite you to do so, because each time a new episode drops, you will be notified immediately. And if you feel called to share this with someone who you think can benefit from this deeply, that would mean the world to me. Thank you for being here. It is a true honor.